Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Glad to know you're still tuned in to Early Exchange on SOUQ News Television. My name is Temple Barra. Welcome back. Well, I still do have for company the pleasure of Temi Omole, and I'm certain I pronounced it quite correctly this time around. Temi?
I said I'm proud of you, but that would make you sound like I'm your mama. So I'm just going to say, not a bad job. You're getting it. It's not a bad job. So yes, it's Temi Omale.
All right, so we would go into the conversation straight up. But first and foremost, let me let you know that we've been joined in the studio by a public and international affairs expert, Sam Oroje. I hope I didn't mother that one then.
No, you don't. Doesn't seem like you did.
Okay.
A pleasure to be here. Good morning.
Glad to have you here, sir.
Good morning.
Nigeria, dubbed the giant of West Africa, and Africa indeed, primarily rich in oil and gas, but then also does have deposits of mineral resources scattered across the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, has seen some of these mineral resources start to gain traction over the years. But very recently, the federal government, in its wisdom, if I would say, decided to increase the rates for mineral resources remittances, according to the Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Dele Alake, has not been paid to the federal government, as he insists that over the years, miners have continued to, if I may, defraud Nigeria. Now, what is the implication of these increased rates? We'll get to find out. And of course, none other will be doing justice to this conversation other than Sam. Glad to have you once again on the program.
My pleasure, Tempo.
All right, so let's just get into it real quick. Our over-dependence on oil has been an issue, a subject of discussion. And of course, it's not new that we do have mineral deposits, scattered across the nation, right? Coal in Enugu, gold in the north.
Bitumen in Ondo.
Bitumen in Ondo, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this one now, kaolin, which I hear has great potential.
Absolutely.
But have we as a nation, or as Nigeria as a nation, been able to live up to the expectation of tapping into this enormous potential and exploring it to the gain of the economy?
Thank you very much indeed, Tempo. Let's put it into perspective. When oil was discovered in Lulubiri some 60-something years ago, the focus moved away from some of the primary export commodity that Nigeria was known for. And the focus was now based on oil and gas. And every effort and successive governments are focused more. But nevertheless, the other mineral deposits that the government has not really paid attention to over the years because of the over-reliance on oil and gas export from the country. So the mineral deposits across the country have suffered some setback, whereas you have a lot of indigenous people doing a lot of illegal mining. But the potential for that sector is very high. With the new regime and the policy framework that changed last year, where some elements were removed from the exclusive list into the concurrent list, that provided some impetus for some government to look at the mining sector as an alternative means to generate revenue. So the potential for mining is enormous, just like every other commodity that the country is endowed with. But the challenge has been to what extent has the regulatory environment be able to bring to speed the indigenous people that are exploiting some of these minerals, particularly gold, columbite, kaolin, dolomite, and some other ones that are well reserved across various sectors of the economy. Maybe as we progress the conversation, be able to speak to some specific issues in terms of solid mineral resource management and exploitation.
Okay, so I think we've started up on the right footing. So before all of the increase by the Ministry of Solid Minerals Development, people who were in the mining sector did enjoy some form of tax holiday. You know, I don't think there was a system that was put in place to ensure that revenue was generated from that sector. So right now we hear there's going to be company income tax, withholding tax, mineral rights royalty, value added tax, which are a little more than some of the taxes that we're used to already. And do you think we have the apparatus to begin to tax
Explore
the mining sector?
Oh yes, the potential in the mining sector is enormous, as I mentioned earlier. The various elements that you just mentioned have always been in place, but because of the faulty regulatory framework and the faulty business environment where indigenous and illegal people had exploited that sector for a very long time, then now it behoves on government in terms to re-engineer the process and see to what extent can solid mineral impact on economic growth and development. So some of this new initiative in terms of royalty, in terms of income tax, in terms of whatever you need to pay to get a mining license has always been there. But the government has always had a blindfold, if you allow me to use that word, in terms of pursuing the legitimate means of earning from that sector. So this new development in terms of reviewing the fee that are in that industry is good. That we provide some impetus for reinvestors to come into that. These illegal miners, because of some of this regulatory framework and the increase in the fee that is being paid for license renewal and mining acreage, we put that industry in a good stand.
Okay, if I might ask, so we understand the existence of the illegal miners. We understand the gaps that exist in the laws and all of that are guiding it. I mean, sometime in January this year, we had the Oyo State experience, particularly Ibadan, where there was an explosion that happened in an estate, Bodija precisely, and there were documents that surfaced on the internet about how there was some sort of permission given. Now, whether legal or illegal, that's still a question that is still clumsy, but there were explosives somewhere in a premises in that estate that led to the explosion and was somewhat traced to illegal miners. Now, my question is, increments in the tax and all of those other taxes that are showing up in an industry where you're still battling with
legal
framework, I mean, doesn't it increase the illegality? And now, doesn't it even create more room for exploring? I would think, why not just make the stuff simpler than the 100% kind of increments? I mean, what do you say to that?
I think the Ibadan case that you just mentioned was just a case in point, and I'm not too sure from the geological surveys that we have that Bodija, where that thing happened, has a kind of mineral reserve. But if people had brought some raw material into that environment and they were exploiting those resources and there was an explosion, then the government need to do the needful in terms of bringing people to bear or make a call so that people are punished adequately. But on a larger scale, I think that industry has all the necessary regulatory framework, even from the colonial time. But the focus shifted when oil was found in larger deposits. So the focus on solid mineral has not been really in the public domain. So increasing those fees in terms of licensing, in terms of mining rights, in the right direction so that you can provide that regulatory framework that will energize our sector so that government can maximize the benefit from mineral exploitation and exploration, which will increase on the GDP and by extension, economic development. So what the Minister for Solid Minerals has done is to use his mandate within the regulatory framework to see how we can push the agenda in that sector so that we can maximize the benefits. Particularly what has happened in Zamfara. If you look at the kind of recklessness, permit me to use that word, that has happened in terms of gold mining, I think that's not a desirable way for a country to exploit its mineral deposit. But now that the law is has been removed from the exclusive list, I think state governments and some local government will find a way to see how they can put a regime in place that will sustain the revenue from that sector.
Okay, the state and local that you just mentioned, more like took a peek into the question I was going to ask. I was going to say that, wouldn't it be simpler if these laws were brought closer home? Like, allow the states and maybe some local governors some level of autonomy in creating these guidelines or laws that would make it easier to control. So in my own state, for instance, Ondo State, way from forever, we've always had bitumen feature in some of the songs that children sing in schools. And so we know that there's bitumen here. Maybe some education at the local level and some measure of domesticating some of these things might help before we get to the broader space.
No, the laws are already there. Once that regime was changed just last year, where some of those things were removed from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. So local government, state has their own role to play in terms of who issue what. So they are spelled out. The focus should be to what extent can we sanitize that industry?
Okay.
Just like the benefits that we get from oil and gas, which is our mainstay currently. To what extent can the state, the federal, and the local government can take advantage? And mind you, you just made an example of bitumen. Ondo State has the largest deposit of bitumen. But as we speak, the base oil for doing bitumen is still being brought into the country, sadly. So the point is that now that the regime has changed, the Ondo State government should focus on how they can get investment to exploit those minerals for the benefit of the citizens of that state.
Absolutely.
Until we make that kind of investment, then some of these minerals that are lying idle in some states will not benefit the citizens. So the charge here is that we should not focus more on the federal government. Citizens should make their state government and local government or call them to account in terms of exploring this mineral rather than using illegal miners who exploit it for their personal benefits.
So I grew up, listening to the news a lot. And then one particular city that featured prominently is Ajokuta, the steel company that never became, and enormous potentials that we could benefit from. And I think during the Obasanjo administration, it came alive again. But then I've had privilege to travel that route in Kogi and route Abuja, very close to the mill, to the steel company. And then, you've also, on the other hand, you have the power transmission companies on the other side of the road. And you're looking at
abandonment in
I'm
real.
trying to find the right words to describe it. And, for fear of not being less patriotic, you understand where I'm going to. And then you see how large the land space and what has been invested.
And the promise it holds.
And where we've not been able to get it off the ground. Now, this is also in relation to the ceramic industry we have in Abia State, in Umuahia, where you have an industry with such potential to you can even provide for your immediate environment, and yet we're still importing spoons, ceramic plates. Yes, there's a move from the usage of some of these things, but then people still use steel. It's still a veritable business to venture into. So I don't know how you're going to relate to that, and what is the current administration I feel yes, you've moved certain things from the
Exclusive list.
exclusive to the concurrent list, but it doesn't feel like there are actionable plans to ensure that we benefit from all of the resources that we have.
I think the issue here has to do with the international conspiracy on the one hand, and the political will within the subnational and national government. I don't see a reason why you make that kind of massive investment for steel development in Nigeria. Growing up in the early 80s as an undergraduate in the Nigerian university, the language then was that by the time the steel rolling mills, the steel complex in Alaja Delta State, and there's another rolling mill somewhere, I think in Jos, when they come into fruition, we'll be looking towards having some level of capacity in terms of employment, but that has not come true as we speak. So the issue here is, were those steel rolling mills set up to succeed first and foremost?
Okay.
The critical question. Number two, successive governments have always gone in there and they want to recapitalize, revitalize those corporations with a view to adding value for the original designs. But that has not really helped. And so if we look at the other aspect of international conspiracy, if we look at what we call the political will to drive the process for national development, I think is a million naira question that we may not be able to answer at this particular point in time. But I think it is citizen diplomacy that will help to resolve this issue by trying to see how we can pressure government to make some of these investments work for the citizens.
If I had to prefer a solution and probably put you back on the spot, is privatization the way to go?
Yes, for that industry, privatization is the way to go for those set of industry. But when you talk to
mining gold,
not public-private partnership,
whichever arrangement that is comfortable, depending on the investment climate and those who are interested in that particular industry. So a PPP arrangement is sustainable depending on the contract regime, and it depends on the mining acreage that is available in terms of exploitation. So if the business plan and the business viability are nice to investors, then the PPP arrangement will be sustainable. And I think that we can arrange these illegal miners in a cooperative manner, in a sustainable manner, that they can benefit by giving them a common license to mine in certain places. But privatization as an omnibus development paradigm has failed. Even the World Bank had a challenge. And I can just mention a few, particularly water, that has been trying to be privatized. Privatization of water elsewhere, particularly in India and Germany, has failed. So there's a concept of trying to use municipal, that's like local government, to run those enterprises to benefit. Even the water giants of the world, called Viola, had failed, even in India and in Germany. So privatization is not an entire recipe for development.
Like a solution for some of this.
Yes.
Let's talk accountability and transparency. I'm a thoroughbred Nigerian, and I know that we can be very pessimistic, especially when new things spring up. So an average Nigerian is very eager to see where does this lead. And sometimes we look at it and say, maybe it's a failure on arrival, or maybe we just watch and see. What do you think can help maybe make it settle more home with Nigerians in terms of transparency and accountability on the part of the government?
I think it's more of citizen diplomacy. What I mean by citizen diplomacy, where citizens are able to hold their government to account. Corruption is a universal concept. There's no way you don't have corruption. But when people are held to account, then the issue of transparency and accountability become sustainable. But when you have a docile citizens who always complain without an action plan, then government can take advantage of that docility, and they are not able to deliver value for the citizens. So the core here for this conversation is that citizens should focus more on the gaps and inability of government to deliver on what they promised them during the election. Once we're able to bring government to account, then the deliverables that they promise us will reach the citizens. So it's more citizen diplomacy. The civil society group should be more accountable in terms on the call to action for government to be able to deliver value on the common good or the public good.
In line with citizen diplomacy, sorry, Temple. I don't know if there. I'm not sure that there was a conversation, like a consensus, to bring together like stakeholders and all of that, and have a conversation before all of this was kicked in. So that might appear like some cart before the horse or horse before the cart's approach. But then, if there wasn't, is there a way to?
No, there was.
that?
There was.
Okay.
The minister, I can recall, the first quarter of this year, he was going around where he had the mineral deposit, and there was a stakeholder meeting. He actually had a summit. I can recall in particular where stakeholders are brought together to discuss the issues and challenges in that sector. In fairness to the ministry, I think that conversation narrative was in the public domain, but more often than not, people focus where their interest lies. So, and it's the responsibility of the media to focus more on the entire stakeholder framework rather than cherry picking some of the issues for analysis, like what we're doing, because people are not really comfortable with the increase in rates in terms of licenses, acreage, renewals, and all that. So they focus more, and as the media shape the public agenda, they should only look inward to see how they can kind of periscoping some of those other issues that are not in the public agenda, so that we can have a balanced reportage and information management for the benefit of the citizen.
We're looking at a lot as regards the implementation, the fact that we want to see things work, especially in the mining industry. But then there's been this issue of a tax holiday that's been given to miners. And I'm thinking this probably was done to see if we could resuscitate
the sector,
that sector, see if that sector can bounce back eventually. And so now the minister, Dele, is saying that miners are making a lot of money in Nigeria and they're not remitting, that sum. And so there's been 100% increase in the rates that, they will have to pay. And so it's imperative we look at some of the taxes that miners will be paying eventually. I don't know if you can weigh in on this. We're talking about company income tax, withholding tax, mineral right royalties, value added tax, and the list goes on and on. But here's the thing that I'm certain Nigerians are used to: overtaxation, or rather multiple taxation. And so would you say this is the case here, that Nigerians or miners in Nigeria are going to be experiencing multiple taxes? We just have one particular tax. You pay for this, and instead of paying for this and paying for that, and you probably might be you probably have a hole in your pocket.
I would think that the mineral rights royalty is a good enough tax to cover everything, for instance.
No, I don't think so. I think if you look at taxation, when it talks about mineral deposits, I think Nigeria is still some of the lowest in terms of the rates that you pay for mineral deposit. Yes, I'm sure of that, certainly. And there's nothing extraordinarily different from what is laid out there. And you don't
want mining in large quantity.
No, just a second. The point here is that when you talk about the various tax regime and you roll them out there in the public eye, it looks as if something extraordinarily has happened. Within oil and gas, you have royalty that those who have acreage or oil mining license, they pay some royalty. So that take care of that, and that's just about 500,000. If the figures that I saw in the papers yesterday's are correct. Then two, you're talking about company tax. So for the fact that you're operating a business within the national boundary of Nigeria, then it behoves on you to pay company tax. When you talk about withholding tax and value-added tax, those are elements
Statutory.
of that, taxation that you need to pay. And mind you, like the minister said, people are taking advantage of the solid mineral ecosystem that has not been well managed over the years, and they are ripping the country off. So this will put a pay to some of the rascality, permit my word again, that has taken place in that industry. So I don't see anything unusual in terms of those tax regime, and these are not double taxation. Is where the state, local government come in and want to take some other tax beyond those ones stipulated within the solid mineral regulatory framework. So I think this is in the right direction. This will sanitize the industry, and at the end of the day, we will get value for money in terms of mining. For those who may be challenged, those who are into illegal mining operation that don't have license, and I think the government will come hard on them if they don't get what they call artisanal licenses, where they cooperatively have an acreage that they can mine.
So the government has cited revenue increase and sectoral development as some of the reasons why these decisions have had to be made and all of that. Would you say that this might somehow affect the level of investment that this sector will enjoy, or would it tilt upwards and boost the revenue?
I think that with the new regulatory framework and the implementation plan by the solid mineral resources, it will attract more investment into that sector, because the sector has not really been well organized. So people do not really want to put their investment there. So if the government is going to allocate these acreages in terms of who has a mining right, who has a license to operate on what area, what is the quantum in terms of the geological survey of the deposit and the economic potentials and the return on investment, I think this will attract more people into that industry. Those who will be complaining are those who are already operating an illegal regime that is favorable to them without necessarily impacting the bottom line of the government in terms of what they pay to the government. I think this will sanitize, in my view.
Okay.
So I'd want to just take this from another angle, Sam. I've seen some of the mineral resources that we have. You know, if I have to sound Nigerian, I've seen the mineral resources that we have now, right? And how many of these mineral resources do we actually mine in large quantities? And then, of course, you don't. The reason they're called mineral resources is that they're not finished products. Even the oil, it's not, the crude oil is not finished. You don't use it in that form. You have to process it. It has to go through, various processing. And apart from probably gold, which you'd still have to heat up to put in bars and all that, every other mineral resource has to have a finished product. Do we have the industry, or is there a market out there, that requires? Because you're going to be taxing, there's going to be a lot of expectations if we go by this. So
is there a market for the production at the end of the day?
Exactly. And then are we mining in large quantities?
No, the point here that I just made earlier is that once you are able to put those framework and you're able to implement some of those framework in an actionable manner, then investors will come in. But what currently happens is that there are a lot of fraud in that industry, where people take a greater percentage of what is mined into other space for final refining, which is not beneficial to the country. So she mentioned Ondo, for example. We have a lot of roads that lead bitumen for construction. To what extent are we taking advantage of that deposit rather than this over-reliance on importation? But you are able to deal with that scenario, then it becomes a problem to manage these various sectors. But when you talk about potentials and opportunity, the solid mineral space has that potential to help in terms of development.
So I would like to draw the curtain down just a little bit. But before I do, I'd like to paint a particular picture. And that's the fact that somewhere in Okigwe, I think close to Ishiago or so, you have people, when it comes to sand dredging, they just dredge,
Mhm.
and sell. I've seen scenarios where foreigners
Mhm.
now have like a yard or something fenced around,
Okay.
and then the house member represent, I think close to Squatter, had gone to find, okay, you have queries, you're mining rocks and all that kind of stuff. What gave you access? And you find out that the locals had given these lands
Mhm.
to these foreigners in collaboration with probably a paramount ruler, the Eze or the local government. And so, yes, we've been talking about framework. It's expedient that we, just like you say, all lands belong to government.
Mhm.
It's expedient to outline some of these things so that you know who you're supposed to go to, especially when you want to do business genuinely, because we're looking at the illegality of it. But someone who wants to do legal business needs to understand what he needs to do
Where
to
to
ensure
go.
he's got the right. Nobody comes knocking on your gate to say what you're doing here
It's
is
illegal.
out of place.
Mhm.
The point is that when you talk about solid mineral, there are regulatory requirements that are spelled out. So if you go to the dashboard or the website or the landing page of the solid mineral ministry, you see all the necessary requirements that you need to be able to exploit mineral resource. Some of those things they do with the locals are exploiting the environment. So it's responsibility of the state government because even the land is domiciled with the state. Therefore, the Imo State government should do the needful by trying to see how they can sanitize that process. I hear that people are shipping sand from Nigeria.
Out of Nigeria.
Yeah, so I don't know to what extent the government is benefiting from that kind of enterprise. So they need to put all the necessary framework at state level. They have their framework as well. The Ministry of Industry, in some cases, are responsible for those exploitations in those environments. So, but the message here is that government and government officials should be up and doing and see how we can use this opportunity for the common good or the public good. If we're able to do that collectively, then the country will be on the right path of development.
Well, many thanks to our public and international affairs expert talking about Sam Oruje, who has thrown light on the increase in remittances for mining in Nigeria.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.